Okay, thank you. All right, well, it's 9 o'clock, so I will call the meeting of the Board of Directors for the Houston Forensic Science Center to order. Just a couple of reminders since we are a virtual meeting yet again. Just remember there may be a delay in the audio. So if you ask a question or you have a comment, just give it just a second because some folks may need to unmute and so that they can answer. Let's see, during each of the presentations, our speakers will, after each slide, make sure to see if anyone has any questions. If you have questions and you have access to the raise your hand function, I will be watching along with our secretary, Ms. Benton, and general counsel, Ms. Mance, will be watching to see if there's hands raised. And if you don't have the raise your hand function, just start waving and we'll keep a track. But I'll make sure that at the end of every presentation, I'll take a moment just to make sure to see if anyone has any other questions before we move to the next presentation. Let's see, we will have several, we've got voice votes and we've got roll call votes. And so we'll make sure we'll call and make sure we know which ones we're doing. If we lose a board member or someone needs to leave, I will need to interrupt whoever is speaking just to make sure that that absence is noted for the record, okay? So if I interrupt you, I apologize in advance, but we need to, since we're having virtual meetings, I need to make sure that we do all these things. Okay. We've done the call to order, so we will move to agenda item number 2, which is going to be the roll call and confirmations of a presence of quorum. Miss, let's see, Miss Benton, will you please call the roll for today for the meeting?
Yes, ma'am. Chairwoman Mitchell.
Present.
Vice Chair Lenschke. Director Vasquez.
Present.
Director Hilder.
Present.
Director Medina.
Present.
Director Blancett.
Present.
Director Cohen.
Present.
Director Moore.
Present.
Director Huff.
Okay, great.
Director
We have
Huff.
Present.
Yes.
And I'm here too.
And Director Calabrese.
The Texas Open Meeting Act in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency. The board is mindful of the health and safety of its members, staff, presenters, and the public, so we are utilizing video conferencing in an effort to help slow the spread of COVID-19. Okay, moving on to agenda item 3, public comment period. We are providing 2 ways for the public to comment during this meeting in accordance with the governor's directive. First, the board meeting notice provided an email address for members of the public to send requests to speak during the public comment period. Those requests had to have been sent to us by Thursday, September the 10th. That was yesterday at 9 a.m. Madam Secretary, did we receive any requests for comments by email?
No, Madam Chair, we did not receive any requests for comment via email.
Okay, thank you. To make sure that we're giving the public every opportunity to participate in this meeting, I will open the floor now to provide time for anyone from the public who has joined this video conference and did not sign up in advance. If there is anyone who would like to speak up at this time, please unmute yourself now and state your name. Each member of the public will have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, finally.
Okay, I'm going to leave the public comment period open for just a few more minutes, just in case there's anyone from the public who may be having difficulty connecting, and then we'll close it in just a little while. Okay.
Excuse me, but this is Ellen Cohn.
Yes, ma'am.
Suddenly my video is not working. Is everybody's video working?
Director Cohen, from what I can see, the videos are turned on. Is the camera icon that's in the middle of your screen, does that have a slash through it?
No, And it was working before, and then suddenly it just turned off, so.
Okay, Director Cohen, may I suggest you drop out of the call and rejoin to see if that fixes matters?
Okay, good luck. I hope I get back. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you.
Mhm. Okay, Director Cohen has left and she will reconnect. We still have a quorum, so I'm going to go ahead and continue with item number 4, which is the minutes, approval of the minutes. So if everyone will take a moment just to review the board meeting minutes from the August 14th meeting, I will consider a motion to approve in a second when you are ready.
I approve the minutes. I
Okay,
move to approve the minutes.
okay, great, thank you. That was Director Hilder who made a motion to approve the minutes from August.
I second.
Okay, Director Medina seconded. This one, we get to do a voice vote, yay. So all those in favor, do we have any changes or anything that anybody has caught that we need to add or correct? Okay, great. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. The motion carries and the meeting minutes from August 14th, 2020 are approved. Thank you. Okay, agenda 5 is the chair's report. I really don't have a whole lot, but I wanted to just make a quick statement. Before we begin our HFSC business, I wanted to just take a moment to commemorate today. Today, as you all know, is September 11th, which is a day that is and has been seared into our memories because of a series of atrocities that killed thousands and thousands of people. 19 years ago today, airplanes crashed into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and a field in Pennsylvania. Those attacks changed all our lives, but not nearly to the extent that it impacted the families who lost their loved ones on that day, and many more after, as the United States engaged in a war to end the terrorism that caused this destruction. I would like for us to just take a moment to remember the lives that have been lost and the families that have suffered as a result. If we could just take a moment just to reflect on this day. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Madam Secretary, has anyone joined the call from the public who would like to make a comment?
No, Madam Chair, we have not had any attendees join to speak during public comment. And if I may, only board members should have their video cameras turned on at this time. Thank you.
Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment period, Ms. Benton, and then we will continue on to agenda item number 6, which is a presentation by Mr. Daryl Davis, who is on our technical advisory group, and Dr. Eric Jones, who is professor and associate dean for graduate studies in the College of Engineering at University of Texas at Arlington. They would like to speak regarding a proposed partnership with HFSC to collaborate on the creation and development of smart evidence containers.
Good morning, everyone. Again, this is Daryl Davis, Technical Advisor to the Houston Forensic Science Center, and also retired DEA Laboratory Director. And I will be introducing Dr. Eric Jones, who is the Associate Dean of School of Graduate at UT Arlington. And we would like to approach the board with a presentation. In my background, evidence accountability has been one of the main stays in forensic laboratories. And it is becoming increasingly more of an issue from a safety standpoint and also for an evidence accountability standpoint. And with that being said, I have been working with Dr. Jones on a concept of using technology as Dr. Jones likes to tell me, is IoT, the Internet of Things, to actually help in tracking, continual evidence inventory, and safety for both law enforcement and forensic analysis. I started this project some 5-6 years ago as I was retiring from DEA. And we had the opportunity to work together. We were funded by a grant from NIST to have a conference. We had a conference about 2 years ago, which 2-year evidence technicians actually attended. And we got some very valuable information, which I'll be able to share, report with you later. But right now, I want to introduce Dr. Eric Jones to talk about the concept and the technology behind creating not only a smart evidence container, but creating the next generation of smart evidence vaults. So Dr. Jones?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
And Madam Chairwoman, have you been able to distribute the slides for the presentation? Or can we share the screen?
Dr. Jones, board members have received your presentations. Yes, sir.
Okay, just want to make sure, because I could share a screen and we could talk through the slides, but I can just summarize. Mr. Davis, when he was the DEA director of the Dallas Labs, and probably 5 years ago, and right before I went to the National Science Foundation to be a program officer, I just returned about a year ago. We looked at the concept of modernizing forensic labs, and the concept of actually using a smart technology that would actually document what's in the smart evidence bag, report it to the cloud, and then that way the evidence, even though it could change because of tampering, that information would always be locked and secure so that when things went to trial, they'd be available. Also, any type of tamper-resistant challenges could be documented as people tamper with the different bags or the different types of evidence. Through that period of time, I went to the Science Foundation, and then we also got a grant from NIST and Department of Justice to actually test out this concept. We brought a meeting of the mind several years back. We met with different stakeholders, and I think Mr. Davis is going to share with you our report. And we've had some great success. One of the big issues is smart rape kits. I'm very uncomfortable saying that, but we had quite a push from the nursing community because those different kits, they change over time, but the evidence can be prosecuted at a much later date. And so the technology we proposed 4 years ago is still available, matured, and also with things like blockchain, it can be even further secured. And so we're looking at, with your reach and with your strength of board, that we seek a partnership in such a way that we could actually continue the research, but also have it, connect to further scrutiny, but also further usage and how this technology would modernize the evidence rooms of the future. So that's where we are. One thing I mentioned to Mr. Davis last night is that we're seeking, hopefully it's some funding or some type of connectivity, so that it's one thing to have your support, it's another when we reach into an agreement where there's funds shared. That way it allows for us to actually connect the technology and also our patent pendings to give us a formal type of relationship. Again, I'm not sure of the center or the board structure and how to work with contracts, but we would like to enter into something a little bit stronger than just a logo. We'd like to do something a little bit stronger so that, one, you guys would be able to see the technologies because we do have some patent pending, but also that you could actually scrutinize as we move forward to other grant opportunities and other federal connectivities. So thank you for your time. I'm going to, I guess, Daryl, I'm going to hand it over to you. Looking forward to it.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Jones. This presentation is informational only. There's no action for us to take today, but if anyone has any questions for Mr. Davis or Dr. Jones, please, we're we're open right now for questions.
Yes, Philip Hilder. Where is this currently being employed?
We actually have a lab set up with Dr. Jones on the University of Texas at Arlington. It's in a preliminary stages, but our first ideal goal is to actually create the smart evidence container. Right now in law enforcement, they're using plastic and paper and cardboard. And at the end of the day, this evidence is actually destroyed via incineration. And so we are looking at creating a different type of material, first of all, to house the evidence that would be safe for the agents and the chemists or forensic scientists that uses it. And then when we go to destroy it, we'll have a less of a carbon footprint into the atmosphere. So right now we're in the, as I say, not beginning stages, but medium stages. So we do have a couple of concept ideas of what this packaging and evidence container will look like.
Okay.
So Phil, I guess to just be a little bit more technical, we have the bag working where it can actually text someone when it's tampered. What we are working on is the chemical detection. So if the chemical changes, that it would actually send.
Ellen Cohen. Yes, he is now joining.
Hey guys, I'm not sure if I'm getting a lot of feedback or is it me, but as I'm talking, there's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure because you can mute all on that. But what I'm suggesting is that we have a preliminary bag that on different conditions, as things are tampered with, it sends an SMS text to the different parties. We can expand that actually to push that through to actually the cloud and also to alerting and inventory management systems. So we have the precursors, but without connecting it to a direct IMS. That's where our next stage is to have that adoption so we can move further into the inventory management systems that exist in a lot of the different agencies.
And when do you think that will be complete?
To be quite frank, my COVID research kind of took precedent. If you see on the news, I'm actually I got an interview in about an hour. But what I am looking for right now is what we are. I'm sorry, Mr. Davis, I said we. Professors are terrible. What we are looking right now is we're backing up and saying we need the adoption before we can just test randomly. Research priorities go by having the leverage, and you guys really have a strong. I'm from Houston, by the way, and my COVID research is in Houston, which is funny. So I know the mayor of Health and Human Services. The mayor and the Health and Human Services director. But right now, what we're looking for is a strong board like yourself, a preliminary study so that we can actually say we work with you guys and your strong board and different members so that we can move forward into a DOJ or a NIST. As a former Fed, they're going to look for that partnership before we really start going into some of these, I would say, high priority and also confidential systems. And so that's why we're looking for your support before we go in the lab and keep testing randomly for no reason. And so I'm hoping that you guys would be interested because we really do need your type of support to actually move forward.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Director Blindsett. I saw your hand up.
Okay. So I have a question regarding the bag itself in terms of its design. It has the wire mesh with current flowing through it, so there's going to be, some power associated with it. Is this power going to be provided through batteries, or how's that going to be done?
Oh, you're exciting me. Okay, I don't know if you saw our design. There are two.
I'm an engineer, so by the way, so
we don't go down the rabbit hole here. I'm a specialist in RFID technologies, which is actually using the capacity, the energy of the transmitter to actually create what we call passive technologies. But initially, we started off with a thin battery, and we think we can protect the thin battery from the casing, especially with cardboard. So I think we have enough protection that we do the thin battery. The only thing we have to be careful of is how long the battery will work if we're using the active technologies. passive technologies, which again, the RFID part of it, if we can actually make that work, then we wouldn't have a battery issue. We would just have to have a transmitter strong enough to create the capacitor to reignite the signal. So that is kind of the breakthrough. I think we solved it, to be very frank. But again, integrating that into text messaging and integrating that power into the cloud is where we need to have a real live implementation.
Right, because I see the power issue as being one place where being able to store evidence for long periods of time, like years, could be a limitation.
But the
other thing
RFID technology does give you a slight it was a 256K database, so we can store the number. We can store the actual number that integrates into the IMS. So we can keep that, which is only 256K, even on passive systems. So, okay.
And the other question I have is regarding the way evidence is stored. So this is a question actually for the lab directors as well. Do we ever have to store evidence in a refrigerated area? And if so, would this technology work there?
Hi, this is Amy Castillo. Yes, we do store refrigerated evidence, mainly in biology and toxicology. We don't now, we used to have like a walk-in freezer that it would have had to work in. Now we don't. It's all in individual freezers and refrigerators.
Okay. So then the question would be in my mind, could this technology they're just talking about work in a refrigerator environment such as I guess a small freezer or a refrigerator?
What temperature are we talking about? When I was in Nebraska, we tested in the Midwest in the middle of a snowstorm. So I don't know what temperature we're looking at in the refrigerator.
For the biology evidence, the freezers are at -20.
Okay.
Toxicology is just refrigerated, but biology it's somewhat extreme.
So if technology is used on your everyday refrigerated freight, going back in front of, if you look at where it's used right now, RFID is used on refrigerated freight for drugs. I don't know the exact temperature. I thought it was -18, but I'd have to double check. But my sense is that we're using the e-pedigree standard that is used right now for refrigerated tractor trailers bringing in drugs in and out of the country. So I believe based on that, it would fit into the technology, but I'd have to be very frank. I'd have to kind of double check with my team.
Mr. Davis, I saw you have your hand raised.
Yes, I also wanted to add, in our early discussions with Dr. Jones on this process, you have this chip that you would literally stick on a bag or a box. But for me, that's really not, what you're doing is tracking an entity. Someone could still go inside of the bag, cut it open, remove evidence, and you will still show that that evidence is where it's supposed to be. We're also looking at a type of technology, and for lack of a better phrase, and I don't want to sound like too much of a geek, but to create some type of electronic field so that whenever that container is compromised, is open, because that was one of the big issues we had, especially doing evidence inventory once a year, that evidence invariably would be unsealed. Now, if that was to become general knowledge, public knowledge, you could definitely have a problem with credibility. So we are looking at that type of technology with RFID to see if we can produce a container. And I try to stay with container versus bag because that kind of, for years, that's all we work with. But what type of container would allow us to track our evidence better?
Yeah, so you're talking, there's a component, again, not to get into the weeds, that's called tamper resistant. So that when people were cutting the evidence bags up and taking cocaine out the back, we could actually track that. There's also a real-time location system, the RTLS piece of it. And I'm not trying to promise the world, because this is sci-fi in my lab, okay? That if you actually move to a different electronic area, the fact that the signal strength will tell you that space, we could almost track when people go bring in the evidence now and when they tamper with the evidence. We can create an electronic log and what's happened to it. Even though people may not look at it for years and years and years, the electronic log would actually either send out a signal or it could track what happened to it, or that something did happen to it. I will be frank, the cost, every time we throw a feature, as I told Davis, it's in my lab, the cost goes up. But is this the future? I think so. And then once certain features are agreed to by a board or by a master stakeholder group, then we can cost out. If make it mass production, the cost would go down. But everything he's talking about is possible. We're testing it. But when we get and what can be bought tomorrow, I want to get that count in, because at some point you have to decide what features and what's the cost and what's the benefit for that cost. But yes, in fact, it's very exciting in our lab. Our students are really excited about the ability that it has to actually deal with tamper issues, that all the different scenarios that Mr. Davis laid out. And so we're having great results. But again, as far as cost, that's where the real research comes in, dropping the cost to do something like that.
What do you anticipate the cost to be?
I've been given a budget number by the stakeholders. So it goes into what do you want the technology to do at the end. If we're really looking at the tamper resistant part, we're still working with some facilitators to deal with the chemical change. We go from change chemical composition, then we're dealing with quite an expensive bag at this point, because we have to detect when that chemical or powder or product changes, and that
is now joining.
That requires a cylindator and a chemical measurement, and we are still working through that number. There is also the Mr. Davis, where people were dying because they're touching the ground.
Wait, we've lost your sound.
That's not.
Yeah, somebody's got a computer and their phone.
Okay. Can you hear me, Phil?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Ellen Cohen.
Is
At
now
one
exiting.
We were also trying to address that people were touching the bags and dying. I mean, there was a situation where people were touching it and getting anthrax. And so we actually were looking at that part of it too.
So, and let me ask this, if you stated it, I may have missed it, but are you looking to our organization for any type of funding, or just for technical guidance?
I would be frank, Phil. No, Mr. Davis probably disagrees with what I'm about to say. And unless we have some funding, we don't really have a relationship. I think.
Wait, you broke up on me. I couldn't hear that. You faded out.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I believe that we should have some type of funding with your organization to formalize a relationship. Now, Mr. Davis may disagree. But I think we should do something together so that we formalize a relationship. That way we can write bigger grants because we have a formal relationship. I think without some type of small grant or something that we work together to show you what we're looking at, it becomes, it's hard to justify a relationship. So, but Mr. Davis and I may disagree slightly. Daryl, did you want to add your?
Yeah, it's not that we disagree, but once again, we know that there are government agencies that's looking at funding these type of projects. Once again, we got our initial funding for about $75,000 to host a conference, which we did about 2 years ago from NIST. We're also looking at NIJ because this is directly impacting forensic laboratories across the country, both federal, state, and local laboratories. So the majority of our funding, we would say, is coming, I'm looking for it to come from the federal government. And as a part of that, with partnership with Houston Forensic Science Center, there may be a line item in there that will also fund whatever work we need to work with you guys on too. So as we move forward with our grant writing, we would love to have that partnership and include the Forensic Science Center, not only as a partner with Forest Road, understanding your evidence flow, but also monetarily too.
Well, do you have any indication or any idea what that would be? Because, you know, quite frankly, I mean, we're very much on a shoestring, believe it or not. And I mean, we would have to have some inkling and some idea exactly what dollars amount you're looking at here.
I was actually thinking personally, something like $2,500. I really just formalize our relationship.
I'm sorry, you keep on breaking up. What
I
did you
was
say?
I was looking at something tertiary, like $2,500, just to formalize the relationship.
Okay.
I'm not looking to really have you sponsor a student, but that type of, at least something of that nature, small like that, would actually allow us to go formally forward, to have a formal relationship with you.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions? All righty, I did not do Dr. Jones justice when I was introducing him. He is quite, you know, a leader in RFID technology. He is a graduate of Texas A&M University, whoop, and he has his degree in industrial engineering, and he has a master's and a PhD in industrial engineering from the University of Houston. So RFID technology is, you know, right up his alley, and his research, which is really exciting. Mr. Davis is one of our faithful technical advisory group members. He is here at every one of our meetings, and although not in that capacity as a TAG member today, but he comes to all of our meetings, and he is really very invested in HFSC. I did just want to make a quick comment about the TAG. I know we have some new members that may not are quite as familiar with the TAG. The technical advisory group was created by our certificate of formation, and that's for the purpose of advising us, the board, as needed regarding best practices for lab management, operations, and maintaining accreditation. The TAG has consists up to 9 members that are appointed by the board, so us, and we currently have 8. This group of experts are volunteers and do not have authority to act on behalf of us, but they are a very, very important resource for us, and we do reach out to them from time to time. And we are very grateful for Mr. Davis, who is always thinking of us. Thank you. And I see him at conferences all the time, which is wonderful. I think, you know, does anyone else have any questions about the presentation that Dr. Jones and Mr. Davis presented to us, the information they presented? Okay, oh, Ms. Blintzett, yes.
I do have one last question regarding funding. I understand you're approaching HFSC to provide some seed funding at $2,500. You know, presumably it's going to cost much more than that for, you know, complete research, obviously. What other groups have you approached regarding finding funding and grants?
Well, to be frank, I think we have DOJ, DEA, and some others, and I think where we're missing some real teeth is an advisory board that really has teeth. I think we will be able to get additional funding with a good relationship or a formal relationship. And to be quite frank, right now I have quite a bit of COVID funding, so I think I can leverage some of that to further some of our previous activities. So in the research game, the goal is we have some funding, but before we invest the additional funding, I need to make sure that we're strong enough to go in front of another agency to get additional funding. So I really value this. I mean, Daryl is really high on the board, but I also think as a university, if we don't get some type of, I mean, if we don't get $5 from you guys, it's going to really be hard for us to go to market. I mean, go to market on grant agencies. So though I really think that what we're hoping to do is really enter into a good relationship, leverage your mass knowledge and your stakeholder group, and then go further. So I think that this is your 2,500 means a lot to me more right now then maybe 75,000, because I really need the group and I need you guys buy-in on it.
Okay, so you're really looking for an endorsement, if you will, from the HFSC for your research or anything else. Okay.
Yes,
All
and
right,
I,
Mr. Davis. Mhm.
yes, if I can add to that, we actually, about 3 years ago, we visited my old laboratory in Dallas and actually sat down and talked with some of the evidence technician and supervisor to once again talk about this concept. And they were very encouraged by it, but as you can imagine, dealing with the federal government, which we are doing as far as from a funding standpoint, it's taking us some time, but there are several solicitations open right now that we will be applying for. And once again, having a partnership with not a federal laboratory, but a private lab like the Houston Forensic Science Center, you open up much more than just us looking at drug evidence. You cover the whole spectrum of forensic evidence. And so your partnership will be great, and we're all right here in the state of Texas. So that really would help us out.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen, Dr. Jones, Mr. Davis. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to present to us today. And Dr. Jones, we wish you the best of luck in your COVID research. I think we all do.
You Google it, it's in Houston. I'm trying to really, woo, exciting times.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Chairwoman Mitchell, if I may interject,
Yes, ma'am.
during Dr. Jones's and Mr. Davis's presentation, Director Vasquez and Director Cohen were having connectivity issues. I just want to confirm that they're both on the call. So Director Vasquez, are you able to speak on the call now? Director Vasquez, if you're on the call, please unmute yourself and declare your presence. Okay, and Director Cohen, are you present?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Director Cohen.
Okay, great. Okay, we're going to continue on now with our agenda with the reports and presentations by our corporate officers. Let's see, as our corporate officers and staff members present today, many of them will share their screens as they speak with us. When that happens, the videos will go to the bottom of the screen if you're on a computer. If you have the virtual hand raise function, you can use it to ask questions again or to give a comment. If you do not, the presenters will pause frequently to ask for any questions, and I will also round it out at the end to see if anyone else has any questions that they were not able to ask during the presentation but want to ask now. There may also be some delay in the audio, so we'll have to give it just a second, and we have to remember to unmute, because I have done that and had a conversation and been totally on mute. So agenda 7 is item number 7 is a report from Dr. Stout, who is our president and CEO. He will discuss technical updates, outreach efforts, staffing changes, and other corporate business items, including steps taken to operate safely and effectively during hurricane emergencies and the COVID-19 pandemic. And he will also provide an update on the vehicle examination building renovation project. Dr. Stout, I will turn it over to you.
Good morning, y'all. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Can you see my slides all right there?
Yes.
Okay. Batting 1,000. Promise I will be shorter this time. I know I went kind of a long time last time, so I will be short this week, this month. Kind of typical stuff to start out with. Turnaround times and productivity. Obviously, we will talk a little bit more in detail about this with Amy and Dr. Lee, but keep in mind, increasing turnaround time for latent prints, biology toxicology is reflective of moving into backlogs, how we calculate turnaround time. The other thing I'd point out there is the enormous portion of what we reported out last month was from toxicology. They have been finding ways to increase their throughput, and it really shows. So I've got to give them a lot of credit for what they've been able to do in spite of all of the challenges we have these days. An update that our annual financial audit is closing, I guess, this week. It's been going on, and we do, keep in mind, we do it's called a single audit. So the auditors come in and do both corporate finances as well as our federal grants, because we are a dollar figure in the amount of grant money that we receive that requires a federal audit of our grant monies. So we will present the results of that audit finding and the official audit result of the audit report at next month's board meeting. Staffing, actually doing pretty well these days on recruiting. Right now we are sitting right at 203 employees. You can see the breakout. Really nothing much has changed there from last month. We have had a number of offers that have been accepted, and really the only position we're really struggling with trying to fill is the DNA analyst, experienced DNA analyst. And finding experienced DNA analysts is an issue all around the country. I'm a little suspicious this has actually gotten worse because of COVID. I have talked with other labs around the country where DNA analysts have been basically moved out of forensic settings and into clinical settings because the COVID testing, PCR-based testing, is very similar to what we do in forensic testing. And so I know there are labs around the country that have struggled with personnel because they have been moved over into COVID testing. But I think because of that expansion of the demand for those types of skill sets, it's making it even more difficult now to find experienced DNA analysts. So we'll keep looking for that one. They're finishing up the interviews for the late print manager. We have 3 internal candidates for that. So I expect a decision about that one soon. And we're still recruiting for 1 toxicology analyst, but we have a number of interviews coming up for that. We'll point out on the vacancies that we're still in transition. Our now acting tech lead is progressing. She's finished off some of the coursework requirements that we needed to get her finished with to qualify as the acting tech lead. That really is going to change the circumstance to recruiting for the DNA training coordinator in the near future. So that entire circumstance and that transition is progressing nicely. We have a change in one of our quality specialists. The one individual there just gave her indication of resignation just a couple weeks ago. So we're working through when and what we recruit for there. And we still have the 1 seized drug analyst that we're contemplating just what to do in our strange new world. Are there any questions about staffing? Okay. 1 new certificate, Kayla Jaskolka, a new certified property and evidence specialist. Always glad to see somebody pick up a new certificate. So congratulations to Kayla. Outreach, I had a meeting with Commissioner Garcia last week about property and evidence management. I think the basic upshot of that is he's supportive. There certainly are some things to work out with the city around that, but a little bit of progress there. We had a number of virtual presentations by staff, Joe Perrion, who's in firearms, and our general counsel to SMU Law School. So people still keep finding, and we've got a number of upcoming participations in several national meetings that are all virtual coming up in the next few weeks. Do want to point out we've got what has become an annual symposium. This year is a little different. Won't have a physical on-site symposium, but we have a partnership with the Quattrone Center at Pennsylvania Law School to do this virtually. And what we're looking at is a topic around the importance of evidence and evidence handling. Just a little update and debrief of how things went with Hurricane Laura, since that did we dodged a real bullet there. Certainly if you're in the Lake Charles and Beaumont area, you did not dodge that bullet. Had that storm wandered even 30 or 40 miles east, we would have had some serious impacts. So we got very lucky, but it was a nice test of our preparedness for it. We did close the facility on Thursday, and we stayed closed, even though Friday in the mid to late evening, we understood, we weren't going to have any impacts, but we stayed that way just to reduce the disruption on staff. We continued to report things out because people were prepared to be working from home on Thursday. It took a day to shut down, move instrumentation away from windows, cover things up. Everything came back up nicely. It was a good test of moving the one refrigerator to a place where it goes on the generator. The generator actually had periodic maintenance, just our regular maintenance cycle had occurred that Monday right before the hurricane, so we were pretty confident about the generator's performance. And I think, learning out of the last few storms, we did better. I think staff were
Anna
much more
Vasquez is now
prepared. It was much
exiting.
easier for them to deal with. They had more time to plan and didn't get stuck anywhere. So we'll think through things, debrief about this, make any improvements that we need to, but it went pretty well. It was a good test. Any questions on hurricane impacts or hurricane preparedness? All right, you probably saw earlier this week a couple of media articles and press release early this week. We officially launched our testing method to distinguish hemp from marijuana on Tuesday. So this is the method that gives an over-under cutoff decision point at 1% delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol in plant material. And only plant material is what we have validated at this point. So if you recall, this has been a very long arc getting to this place. We did this in collaboration with some of the laboratories in the state to validate this. But it is a big caveat, and there is an ongoing discussion with state legislators right now about all of the other stuff out there. Oils, waxes, shatters, edibles, vapes. We are not in a position to be able to test those. In order to be able to test those, there's going to have to be different instrumentation, and there's still, it started with the Federal Farm Act of the imperfections in this legislative language, but the legislation is imperfect and creates a lot of problems for laboratories and a lot of problems for enforcement. So there's going to have to be some clarifications in legislative language in order to make this work for anybody, and I just don't know what's going to happen with that. But the method is in place. We are now using it, and we will see. We've got about 15 cases, I think, in hand that over the last 15 months, the DA's office and HPD have wanted to get that determination on, so we will work on getting those done. Any questions about marijuana issues?
Dr. Stout, I just need to interrupt to say that Director Vasquez left the meeting at 9:45 a.m. so we can record that in the minutes. I apologize for interrupting.
No worries. This is the world of online. Not too much to update from CSU. Jerry's out today, so I've got his update in this. Main thing just to keep everybody aware of, homicides keep increasing. August saw a 32% increase this August over last August. Houston sits as the 5th highest increase year to date of any major city in the US. That is a grim statistic, and it is wearing on crime scene. No way around it. I wish I could make this easier for them, but this is just the reality that we have. All right, so for crime scene, the vehicle exam building, that renovation project is proceeding. This is what we have a little bit of federal money for to accomplish. I think the primary thing to report here is construction will start next week. We've got that all arranged. The schedules are there. There are a couple of small logistical things yet with the city and some of the financing to get cleared up, but I think we've got a path on that. So it's it's looking like it's actually going to start happening next week. And we will start getting some of those security issues and everything put together. So I'm optimistic that we will stay on the timeline and get this finished up, and it will be a big benefit to crime scene to have a better facility over there. Can I answer any questions about the vehicle exam building?
No, but I would like to welcome Mr. Evans back from being out ill. He's coming back at the perfect time now as things are ramping up with the VEB. So.
Yes, he is. Yeah, Charles is on the call. I know we were all very worried about Charles, but he's doing better now.
Yeah,
It's good to have him back.
thanks very much for your support there. But I'm much better now. Thank you.
All right, just a little bit of an update around COVID-19 stuff. We are still optimistic. We are working with the city about this and all of the details of how this works, but that we will have access to some federal funding to support efforts around COVID-19 preparedness and things that we've done to address that, including being able to continue staff testing through November, maybe into December, kind of depending on just how many tests we do. Testing has continued along. I think we may have results here from this week's testing. Maybe it should be today that we'll have those results. So far, we still have not had a positive yet. Don't know about this week. In that testing, staff have been very supportive of that testing and have been very compliant with using that testing. We also have in that budget resources to make some improvements, largely in IT infrastructure for security, for data access, basically trying to drive it, making it easier and more secure for people to work remotely and be able to get at more data remotely. So there is funding in that budget that addresses networking issues, security issues, peripherals that people need to interact like this. And this is all predicated on the fact that we've had staff absences from impacts from COVID-19, continuing necessity to keep people distanced from each other, and that impacts operations. We also have some budget in there that everybody has been agreeable is appropriate, approvable to continue with some of the toxicology outsourcing, because the plan that we have been struggling with to improve toxicology obviously has been impacted by this. We have not been able to validate things as quickly as we would have liked, get people trained as quickly as we would have liked. So that service of outsourcing is something that is allowable under CARES Act. Any questions on this? All right, so I guess I go into item 8 here about annual priorities and performance objectives for the organization. Any questions on any of my other report part?
Yeah. I didn't see any hands raised on your report at all, Dr. Stout, but I do have a little preamble before we move into the company goals on item 8, if you don't mind.
Please do.
Okay, if the board recalls, at our July meeting, Dr. Stout requested and the board approved moving this presentation of his annual priorities and performance objectives to the September meeting. So here we are. As you can see in the summary sheet for this agenda item, the presentation is a requirement of Dr. Stout's employment agreement and part of the board's annual evaluation of his performance. At the conclusion of the presentation, we will vote on the proposed priorities and performance objectives. With that in mind, I will turn this over to Dr. Stout. And please, if you have questions about the goals, he will be happy to discuss them, and I'll be on the lookout for the raised hands also. Dr. Stout, I give you the floor back.
Okie dokie. All right, so for 2021, so 3 years ago, we went through an exercise with all of the staff to set a framework of goals to meet objectives that we want to try and drive for the entire organization. So this was this framework of how we laid out these goals around production, quality of the workplace, quality of the product, and how we can try and measure and create goals that would drive the performance that we want towards those ends. So this is the last of that 3-year cycle. So these goals really don't change that much from what was last year, but there are a couple of things to point out and make sure we discuss. So the first goal is 100% of sections completing 80% of their monthly one-on-ones. We had last year the completion of 80% of the one-on-ones. And what we've been finding is there are some sections that if they don't miss this, on average, you could still see 80%, well above 80%, because some sections far exceed this goal. So we want to make sure that all of the sections are doing this. So we added in for 2021 that all of the sections need to meet that goal of the monthly one-on-ones. This goal in particular is one that I really would attribute. It has driven some positive impacts in the culture of the organization. I think you can see where staff feel more engaged, feel more empowered and engaged with their supervisors. That relationship between supervision and staff, I think, has been improved by this goal. We've kept the 12% or less voluntary turnover rate. Actually, I think our turnover rate for last year was about 6.5%. We based that 12% off of past historical performance and industry standards. I think the industry is somewhere more between 15 and 20%. This is a goal we will certainly look at in this next cycle of, do we need to reduce that percentage to match more where we've been, about 6%, or how we might need to revise this. But for 2021, we've kept the 12% target. The third goal there is that we have each staff member receives a minimum of 16 hours of continuing education. That 16 hours comes from a combination of the OSAC standards that are starting to be promulgated. And so you recall, we have self-adopted OSAC standards. And the Texas Forensic Science Commission requirement is 12 continuing ed hours. So we've taken the OSAC standard rather than just the TFSC requirement for licensure. I'll agree, and I think David was one that pointed this out. You know, as a CPA, he's required to have, I think, 40 or 45 hours. My wife's PT license is, I think, 45 hours a year. 16 hours is small. But in the forensic world, 16 hours is well above where the world has been. So I would like to see this number go up farther, but for the time being, that is actually on the upper end of what you see required in the forensic world. So the production goal is probably the one that changes the most, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. And the other part of that production goal is we are splitting out the support sections, so finance and HR and IT. We'd had those all together in the same production goal, and what we've found over this year is that's difficult to manage all of that. So we've split the support sections out to have their own individual production goals. Any questions so far? Okay. So the biggest thing we have found with the production goal is the way we wrote the production goal of an aspect of reducing turnaround time and reducing backlog is internally in conflict to have that in the same goal. Because, as you recall, we measure backlog from the time the request came in to the time the report goes out. Well, if I go into a backlog like toxicology and latent prints have been doing, my backlog goes down, my turnaround time goes up. So if I have both of those goals written into the same goal, if I accomplish one, I'm not accomplishing the other. So fundamentally, we need to split those two things apart and deal with them differently. So how we are posing to do this for 2021 and probably proceeding is to look at, and we've talked about this over the years, of there's the analysis turnaround time, the time that basically once it's in the laboratory, how long it takes, in comparison to the total turnaround time of what an external stakeholder would see of, I put a request in and I finally got a result out. Well, for our goals for individuals, what we're proposing to do is we shift to the individual staff's goal is around that analysis time, because that's what they can control. That's also continues on whether we're working a backlog case or a current case. And so you can see there, just in the raw data over the last few months, our analysis time stays around 15 to 20 days, but depending on where you're at working a backlog, the total time can vary wildly. So by making the staff's, their annual assessment related to that analysis time, what we're hoping is that really will drive behavior around optimizing analysis time. But we need to keep that measurement of what the external world sees, because that's what the stakeholder cares about. So we're planning to couple that with what we're calling the average age of open requests. So we have been measuring backlog as a percent of requests backlogged. So we take basically the number of requests we have backlogged greater than 30 days divided by the number of requests received in the past 12 months. And every time we talk about this one, I look at the group of 9 faces sitting there, and everybody's eyes kind of roll up in their head, because it's not terribly intuitive, particularly since that is a rolling 12-month average. So the target keeps moving around depending on what we see coming in. So we're hoping that if we look at just the average age of everything that's open, it's a more intuitive measure, because as the backlog goes down, that number starts to decrease, and it also sets up the drive for working the oldest cases, rather than the potential of trying to gain that number by picking cases within there to reduce the backlog but still keep the number lower. So I think we still will come back to this idea of a percent backlog, because in Project Foresight data, so it gives you some picture of our backlogs relative to the rest of the world. But come and look at this at more like twice a year or once a year. So we're looking at a fixed number of cases rather than this rolling average. So in the last Foresight report, and I put the table of it in there, keep in mind those data were submitted to Project Foresight back in March or April of 2019. So it was before toxicology really started having their backlog issues. So that's why when you look at this here on blood alcohol, it has 0%, because really we were before toxicology started having their serious backlog issues. But if you look at where we're at in our percent of cases that are over 30 days relative to the number of requests we got in the last year compared to other laboratories in the country, we're actually either at about the median or substantially below. So even Latent Prince, as much as we sweat that backlog, and that backlog is a serious issue that we can't ignore, we're at a 34% ratio, which is well below. I mean, that puts us probably at about the 10th percentile nationally. Backlogs nationally are enormous. We're actually, and it's one of those that we need to give ourselves a little bit of a break. We can't ignore these things. We need to do better. It still is awful if your case is in that backlog, but recognizing the fact that, relatively speaking, we're doing okay. So I think that perspective is what we want to shift to, using that percent for, and the age of backlog is what we want to use as a goal. So we still have a little bit of data left to collect. So we'll have those data by the end of September. So I guess what you'd be approving is the framework of this, with the fine detail of what specific numbers go in there. We'll come back in October with, but the goal would look something like a lab average of 19 days for an analysis turnaround time, and a 12% reduction in the age of open requests would be how that goal would be framed. So that should drive, the idea is that would drive the behavior of both decreasing those backlog cases as are seen by the outside world, and a production-oriented goal that the analyst can see my work does the direct impact on that analysis time, and I don't have that internal conflict of reducing the backlog, making the turnaround time go up. Are there any questions on any of that that I can help answer? Director Blanchett.
So going forward, are you planning to show a snapshot of this particular metric to the board, or are you going to show trends? And if you show trends, will you go back calculate, say, for some time period, I don't know, maybe a year or so, of how this particular metric would have been applied before, so we can know whether or not you're improving?
Amy's probably better to answer that one. Because she is working on some of those dashboards right now about how we monitor these. I think the short answer to that is we will look at some of that trend data and snapshots, but Amy?
Yes, so I actually am building a new board page and company page to show, those will show snapshots of the data. However, for the analysis turnaround time, we do have historical for that. And we can present it both ways, where we show the overall turnaround time and analytical for each section, or the analysis for each section. The age of open requests is a little tougher to show historical if we haven't been capturing it. The reason being is the way the dashboards work right now for backlogs and open cases is it's a snapshot. So every time I open the dashboard, it's where we're at now. So that'll be something where I'm working on how to best capture that in a way where we can still get some trending information. The way that we're going to work on coming up with a target for that is looking at the current backlogs and the ages and talking with each section in the next year. What do you anticipate being able to do? So Leighton Prince, for example, if you're targeting your older cases and you complete X number, where do we think your backlog is going to be as far as age? And then use all of the information from the different sections to come up with what we think our overall reduction could be. But we are currently working on, and I'm working on the dashboard in a way that we actually are still going to show the snapshots of the overall turnaround time and the backlog, so that we don't lose those from a public perspective. Since, like Dr. Stout mentioned, that's what our stakeholders need to see as well.
Okay. It's just that my concern is that if you're going to use a rolling average for the denominator, the way you keep track of whether or not you're really improving with that, you really have to show a trend. And so that's why I was asking whether you could back calculate some of that information. I understand you have limitations there, but certainly going forward, when we start creating history for the future, that would be helpful to see the trend of it.
Yes, and I'll make sure to include that. I just think that piece will be somewhat manual for the age of open requests, but we can definitely get it and start getting those trends in place.
Okay. Okay.
All right, any other questions we can answer? So I guess, Madam Chair, if I'd request if you all approve this framework, and we will come back in October with those specific numbers in this production goal, but otherwise the framework is what I'd request approval of.
Okay, great. Thank you for that presentation, Dr. Stout. At this time, we must take a vote on the proposed annual priorities and performance objectives for the President CEO that he just presented. If the board votes to approve what has been presented today, then priorities and performance objectives will become part of Dr. Stout's review for next summer. All right, so now we will have to do a roll call vote for this item. I will entertain a motion to approve the list of annual priorities and performance objectives as presented by Dr. Stout. Is there anyone who will make a motion to approve?
So moved.
Who is that? Was that Dr. Cohen?
It was Ellen Cohen, yes.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you. Second?
I second it.
Okay, Director Blanchett seconded. Is there any other discussion on related to the goals and objectives? Okay, Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll for the roll call vote?
Yes, Madam Chair. Before we begin the roll call for the vote, Dr. Stout, will you please stop sharing your screen? And board members, please make sure your videos are turned on and you unmute yourselves at this time. Chairwoman Mitchell,
I vote to approve.
Vice Chair Lunchke, Director Vasquez, Director Hilder,
Approve.
Director Medina,
Approve.
Director Blanchette,
Approve.
Director Cohen,
Approve.
Director Moore, Director Huff.
Approve.
Okay, thank you. The motion carries unanimously. And thank you, Dr. Stout. So there we go. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 9, which is our monthly operations report from Dr. Castillo, who is Vice President and COO. She will include an overview of laboratory turnaround times, backlogs, and an update on the toxicology section. Dr. Castillo.
Hello. Hang on, I'm just getting, can y'all see my screen okay? And hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So for this month, and sorry, every time this happens, I have to figure out which screen to click on to get it to move. Okay. For the overview this month, I wanted to focus on a couple of things. One is we are continuing to see the percent backlog, which is what we've been measuring in the past, go down. I just think the staff deserve a really big shout out for this. We've been dealing continually with the pandemic and all of the changes that we've had to make because of that. We're still in those same split shifts and reducing people on site, and they're still managing to work into that backlog. Also for the month, even though the week of Laura, we saw the backlog going, that trend not go down as far that week because we had to shut down. We still saw it go down for the whole month because we were able to very quickly get the lab shut down and back up. And to me, one of the most exciting things was seeing that cases went out while we were shut down. And that is, I guess, not that there's many silver linings of COVID, but the preparation we've done for COVID and getting people able to work from home, we can see how that's really going to have a long-term benefit for us because we know, hurricanes aren't going anywhere in Houston, nor our floods or any of the other things we deal with. So it's nice to see that we're setting ourselves up to be able to actually send people home and continue to work. The one section that it did impact, and we'll see that impact probably over the next month, is seized drugs. One, it's great when you don't have a backlog and you have a really short turnaround time, but then when you shut the lab down for 3 days, it really shows. And so they're working through that right now. But I would say out of the sections, they were probably the hardest hit by having to shut down. The other piece is we're going to do an update on biology again next month, like we said in the schedule, but we are continuing to see the SAK backlog go down. The main place where we're seeing a lot of progress is the outsource reviews. And that's the piece where when we get a report back from the outsource lab, it's the review that the analysts have to do to get that profile into CODIS. At the beginning of the pandemic, we had over 1,000 pending. We're now, as of today, down to 131. So they have made a lot of progress in that area. And like I said, I'll give next month more detailed update on where they're at on the SAK backlog and against the timeline that we presented to you last month for the overall backlog clearance. So for this month, we're going to focus on toxicology. As we mentioned, the 3 areas we're really struggling are biology, toxicology, and latent prints. We've gotten to talk a lot about biology in the past few months. Last month, we went into some detail on latents. This month, it's going to be toxicology. So I'm going to give a broad overview of where we're at, and then you're going to hear from Dr. Lee, the section manager, on a really great in my opinion, great 3-year plan that section has put together. Not only to clear backlogs, but also to get cross-training accomplished and to really bring the technology up to speed in that section. So first, I'm going to go through a little, I guess a very broad overview of toxicology's process, because I think that's going to help when we talk about the backlogs to understand the different places in toxicology where they can form. So when a sample comes into toxicology, the first step that actually happens is our client services and case management accessions the kit. And that's where they're making sure all the information is correct. They get the tubes on the rack so that toxicology analysts are just picking up that rack and taking it to test for blood alcohol. That first test is for blood alcohol. Depending on that result is how that sample is going to then flow through the process. And so if that sample tests above our stop testing limit for blood alcohol concentration, the report is issued and that sample stops. Because while I think it's really important that we would actually test for drugs in that, from a court perspective, what they really need is that blood alcohol result. And so that report is issued and the case is done as far as we're concerned. If it tests below that stop testing limit, it then goes on to drug screening in the section. So drug screening is something we have, I would say most of the time, a large percentage, we've handled that in-house. We did just recently send out some for screening because with the move and everything going on, we had built up enough of a backlog in that it was going to help to outsource it. But I would say, 90% of the time that drug screening process is done in-house by our analysts. Once that's done, then you have to do drug confirmation. And so that is a really elaborate process. I would say we've talked a lot about DNA. I would say it's not analogous, but when you're talking about how complicated the training is, how complicated the reports are, the amount of review that needs to be done, it is comparable to DNA analysis. And so that's the piece that we have struggled with over the years. We'll talk about, but we've mainly outsourced that piece because we had really old equipment that took a really long time to bring online to do, and that was in June of 2018. And then we found with the equipment we had, it just wasn't sustainable to be trying to do that in-house. And so if y'all recall, and we'll talk more about the LC triple quads, that was when we made the decision to just outsource until we bring those online. Because that's the way we can actually effectively do the drug confirmations in-house. So one takeaway from this is kind of these buckets, right? So if you look at the blood alcohol testing, that first square, that's where we can have a backlog build. We can also have a backlog build in the screening that needs to happen. And we can also have a backlog build in the drug confirmation. So those are the three buckets that when we go through the data, where you'll see cases being completed and backlogs. Does anybody have any questions about that? Director Blancett? I think you're muted.
Okay. I have a legal question about the testing for drugs if your blood alcohol is below the DWI limit. Is that required by law that we need to do that?
Peter, can you help me there? I mean,
Yep.
You got it. Okay.
So, yeah, what you see nationwide, and Texas is similar, that DUI laws are basically two-pronged. There are per se aspects, which is what the 0.08 grams per deciliter alcohol is, that if you are above that limit, you are considered by law to be impaired. In Texas, we don't really have any per se limits on drugs, just alcohol. So then the other prong of DUI is that you are driving while impaired, that you can be assessed at being too impaired to be driving. Now that can be and is usually in part observation in the field and a laboratory result. Now what you see typically is for an actual successful prosecution is you got to have both of those sides. Even though legally speaking, you could have one or the other and should be able to effectively prosecute that. In order to do it, you usually have to have both. So even for a driving while impaired by alcohol, you need to have the observation by the officer that the person was driving erratically and standardized field sobriety tests that indicate impairment and the laboratory result. So what you see then nationwide is it's difficult enough to prosecute an alcohol result if I don't have other extenuating circumstances for a drugged driving case, they often are not prosecuted. So if it's a vehicular homicide or there's injury or there's something like that, that's when they typically will consider prosecuting for a drugged driving circumstance. So this is in part what drives this choice of, if I've got a clear alcohol result above 8.1, so that's even above the per se limit, it just isn't terribly cost effective to do the much more expensive circumstance of demonstrating the drugs that are present there, unless there's some reason that it's going to go to extended sentencing or something like that.
Okay.
And this is then what creates, and you've heard me rant about this one. The circumstance that we have is across the country. We see it here in Texas. Younger drivers tend to be less alcohol impaired and more drug impaired. It's as though all of our don't drink and drive campaigns have finally taken root. We just forgot to say, oh yeah, don't do drugs and drive too. And they tend to have more drugs on board, more different drugs, polypharmacy. So this is going to be, it already is, and it is going to be an increasing issue of the entire system is not well equipped to prosecute drugged driving, from the laboratory's capacity to detect and test, to the prosecutor's ability to construct an effective case, to officers' ability to identify and interdict. It's going to be a problem, and it's going to be a problem that kills people.
Okay, so it sounds like this process here that you've got is somewhat proactive in that prosecutors may not necessarily be using the results of the drugged driving report, but if they could in the future.
Right.
I also noticed that there's a sexual assault fatality is also another criteria.
Yes.
Fatality part I get for driving, but why sexual assault? Why is that in there?
So sexual assault and those are a different suite of samples. Those are usually urines, and they are collected as part of a sexual assault collection. So in sexual assaults, it's not impairment while operating a motor vehicle. Sexual assaults, the drug is used as a chemical restraint. So it is a subset of crimes that we refer to as drug-facilitated sexual assault. And so there, the analysis in that alcohol is still the predominant drug-facilitated sexual assault drug that's used, but there are other drugs that are used and that may be part of the prosecution and investigation of a sexual assault, of why we need to do drugs there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, so for the next slide, I want to talk about some of the challenges we've had in toxicology. And so, as you can see by the graph, the biggest challenge we've had is we've seen if you compare 2017 to the full year of 2019, we've seen a 41% increase in the number of blood alcohol requests that we're receiving. And so clearly the section did not have personnel to deal with that increase. Thankfully, the city has just recently given us 5 new positions, which is really going to help with that, and really also plays into the 3-year plan that Dr. Lee is going to present of where and how we're going to use those 5 positions to help deal with this increase. And if you remember from the workflow, that increase isn't just going to be in the blood alcohol testing. We see about 30 to 40% of the cases need to go through the drug testing process. And so therefore, you're also seeing an increase in that more complicated process, which leads to the next challenges they've been dealing with. That is a complicated and long training process to bring a blood alcohol analyst up to speed for toxicology drug testing. And so when we tried to go online with drug confirmations in-house in June of 2018, a big part of that was cross-training. And so you can imagine having to pull analysts off of blood alcohols to train them while you're seeing a 41% increase in cases is a challenge for the section and how you maintain both things. The other piece was the fact that the instrumentation we tried to bring that online with did not cooperate with the section. We were down more than we were up as far as being able to use those instruments. And so those really have created kind of the perfect storm of why we've seen in the past year or so the backlog really creep up in all of the areas in toxicology, and why we're really excited to have those positions so we can start working on getting them back down. And so just so you can see the data, and this is from April of last year, where you can see the backlogs increasing. So the line you see across the top is the total backlog in the section. It includes all of the buckets that we talked about. And then you can see the bars below that are the individual buckets, right? The things that are sitting in backlog for blood alcohol testing, what's sitting in the backlog for screening for drugs, and what's sitting in the backlog for drug confirmations, which right now that is outsourced, the drug confirmation piece. What we have seen in the past couple months, even with just the 2 new added positions, is the impact that's having on being able to bring that drug, especially the blood alcohol backlog, down significantly. So we really are excited of where we're going to go. Part of what Dr. Lee is going to present, though, that we can't lose sight of is how important it is, as we're clearing these backlogs, to maintain the cross-training. Our concern is if we don't balance those 2 priorities, we're going to end up in the same place again, the same conversation we've had about biology. If we don't get the people where we need them as far as being able to do the testing, we end up on a roller coaster. And so that's why the 3-year plan she's presenting is so important, because it does address both concerns, the cross-training and the backlog clearance. One thing I do want to point out about this graph, because you will see it again as we work through these plans, is what we would expect is the blood alcohol backlog to go down as planned, but you're going to see that some of that then moves to the drug piece. And so that backlog will clear much more slowly because we're bringing the instrumentation online for it. And as we work through, 1,000 cases to test a blood alcohol, that means, we're going to probably at least have 400 of those that move into the next process. And so it's going to take a little longer for those to clear. So we'll keep showing the backlog numbers this way so you can see underneath that total number where we're at, where those backlogs are sitting in the section. Do y'all have any questions for me?
I just
Director Howe?
Yes,
Yeah,
Director
I
Howe.
just have a general question about backlogs in general, not just the toxicology. Is there any prioritization that's applied to these backlog cases, or are they just generally addressed just in order in which they were initially entered into the system?
I would say we do both. Our goal is to work first in, first out. So to work the oldest requests first, because we know people are waiting on those. That being said, we have really good communication with the stakeholders so that if something needs to be taken out of that order because it's, a rush court date, a high priority case, that those will get pushed to the front of the line. And that would be the case in any of the sections where we have the backlog. It's pushed and really important that the managers have a good relationship with the stakeholders so they know they can reach out in those scenarios.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. But just to add another reason why it'd be great not to have backlogs, because then you're not having to pick and choose what you prioritize. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Castillo. Is there anyone else are there any other questions for Dr. Castillo? Okay, we're going to move on now to item number 10. This is another item for Dr. Castillo. She's going to ask us to consider authorizing the president and CEO to enter into a lease agreement with an option to purchase with Agilent Technologies for one LC triple quad device, related components and service for a total contract amount of $368,369.40. This will be a roll call vote after her presentation and discussion. Dr. Castillo, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you. So what this is for is we've recently leased 2 LC triple quads for the lab. They are installed and being validated currently. What we're seeing in this section, though, and we will continue to see, is new drugs coming in all the time. And so this section is going to have to continually be validating and developing methods for those new drugs. Casework wise, we need the 2 we have to be running casework all the time. And so what the third triple quad does, it allows the section to actually keep up with coming up with the new methods, keeping us from having to outsource while we still have casework going on. The other piece, and we're seeing this even with some of the other equipment in the section, is it gives us backup. If these, even though these are newer, we still see they're somewhat finicky instruments. And so if one goes down, what we don't want to have happen is now we're at half capacity. And so it'll also be validated so that if the casework instrument goes down, they can quickly switch over to this instrument and keep the production line going. So that's why we're asking for the third one. Does anybody have any questions about? Yes, Director Blansett.
I know we've talked about, getting this machine at some point earlier this year, and even last year it was discussed at some point. What has been put in our budget to make sure that we can pay for it?
Well, I'll let David address part of that, but what we're doing is leasing these so that we actually aren't having to make the full purchase up front. So we're leasing it over, I believe, David, I think it's a 5-year period, so that basically we're not having to come up with the $368,000 today to purchase this instrument, but we're still getting it in the lab so that we can get it up and running.
So the leasing allocation, is it already in our budget?
Yes.
Okay.
This is David Leach, CFO. That's correct. It's been worked into our budget. We're leasing 2 already, and the third is in the budget, which has been approved by the board.
Okay.
Hi, this is Philip Hilder. I have a question, and that is, okay, we're leasing it, but at the end of the day, it's not ours. Can we get the same terms and purchase it? In other words, making the same monthly payments or however the lease terms are, but towards the purchase as opposed to leasing.
This is David Leach. The lease agreement has a purchase option, and there could also be opportunity to lease it for more time, but with technology. We're not sure where we'll be at the end of 5 years on if this will even be valid technology. So one of the reasons we didn't enter into a firm commitment at the end of it is we want the flexibility just because of the unknown nature of how things are progressing with technology.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions regarding the proposed agreement? All right, this item also requires a roll call vote from the board. First off, I will entertain a motion to authorize Dr. Stout to enter into an agreement with Agilent Technologies for the lease with option to purchase the LC triple quad device for a total contract amount of $368,369.40.
I move approval.
Okay, Ms. Moore Director Moore makes the motion to approve. There a second?
Second.
Mr. Hilder seconds. Is there any further discussion at all? Okay, hearing none. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll for the roll call vote?
Yes, ma'am. And prior to roll call, I do want to note for the record at 10:31 a.m., Director Calabrese left the meeting.
Thank you. I forgot to do that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Chairwoman Mitchell.
I vote to approve.
Vice Chair Lunchke. Director Vasquez. Director Hilder.
Vote to approve.
Director Medina.
Approve.
Director Blansett.
Approve.
Director Cohen.
Approve.
Director Moore.
Approve.
Director Huff.
Approve.
Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Dr. Stout, you may proceed with that. All right, next on the agenda are our reports and presentations by staff. Agenda item 11 is a report from Dr. Dayon Lee. She is the manager of our toxicology section. Today, she will present the toxicology section's 3-year plan for eliminating backlogs and implementing new instruments and training to increase capacity. Dr. Lee, I will turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me share my presentation slide. And let me know if you can see it.
Yes.
It's visible?
Yes,
Okay,
it's
thank
visible. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. As introduced, my name is Dayon Lee. I'm the manager of toxicology section at Houston Forensic Science Center. I'm here today to show you an overview of the section's 3-year plan from 2020 to 2023. And please feel free to ask any questions throughout the presentation. All right. So toxicology section, briefly about us, toxicology section does about 30% of HFSC's caseload. Majority of our cases are from driving while intoxicated and drug-facilitated crime investigation, including sexual assault, as Dr. Stout mentioned. Currently, there are 16 staff members, including myself, and there will be additional 3 new hires joining us in the near future. The reason we established a 3-year plan now is that we are finally at a stage where we can think about the future. As Dr. Castillo went over the past 5 years, we had an increasing workload, limited staff, outdated instruments, and minimum training opportunities. We are still struggling with these issues, but we now have received much needed resources, including 5 new hires and new instrumentations called LCQ-TOP that have been mentioned throughout. That will allow us to perform our analysis more quickly and reliably. And this is why we made a plan so that we can utilize those resources more effectively and efficiently. So first, we set our long-term goal, which is to provide all toxicology test results within 30 days while maintaining quality, cross-training, and professional development. And the plan includes more detailed objective and tasks that we need to complete in order to achieve the goal. As you may have guessed from Dr. Castillo's slide, toxicology section is divided into 3 operations: alcohol analysis, drug screening, and drug confirmation. And each operation is led by a supervisor. And having a supervisor for each group was the first step of the plan. When the previous supervisor left over a year ago, I made a decision to wait because at the time we are undergoing multiple major changes, including having a new laboratory information management system, installing new instruments, and moving into a new facility. So I could not restructure the section on top of those changes. Having a 1 person in charge improved communication, but it was a temporary measure. Now the section has 3 supervisors who provide much needed additional guidance and management. Other tasks include eliminating backlog by hiring and training new hires, building sustainability by cross-training analysts and reviewers, and expanding our analytical capability by developing new methods and adding or replacing instruments. We also have ongoing tasks of participating in professional conferences and publishing papers, because learning the latest technology and research, as well as presenting our work, are essential to improve quality of our services and building our reputation. The plan itself is in Excel, so that we can easily adjust it. The idea is to continually update the plan as we progress. Here I'm showing you a portion of our core page as an example. So each task has a due date, people assigned to it, and its status. So in next 3 slides, I will show you the major milestones that we have accomplished or will complete within a given period. Does anyone have any questions so far? All right, moving on. So this year in the first quarter, we successfully moved to the Jefferson building, revalidating analytical method and completing performance check of our equipment. In the second quarter, the pandemic happened, and in response, we made our review process paperless so that people can do casework from home. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we now have supervisors. In the third quarter, we will complete the hiring process and train more analysts for ARCO analysis and review. In the fourth quarter, we hope to complete the validation of drug confirmation assays so that we can do our drug confirmation in-house, and also install the third drug confirmation instrument, the third LC/Q-TOF that was mentioned earlier. In the first quarter of 2021, we will train more analysts on drug screening and review, and we will optimize our drug screening program. In the second quarter, we hope to have eliminated the ARCO case backlog, and we will do so by completing a target number of ARCO requests per month this year and next year. And this target number will increase as we, based on the available analyst, reviewer, and instrument. So in other words, our target number for until the end of this month is 500 ARCO requests per month, which will increase to 700 until the end of December and to 800 until the end of April next year, as we train more ARCO analysts. So as we complete more ARCO requests than what we received, we will gradually reduce the current backlog, which is estimated to have eliminated by end of April next year. In the fourth quarter, we will train more analysts on drug confirmation and review. And in 2022, we will continue the training on drug confirmation. In the second quarter, we hope to install the third ARCO instrument. In response to the increasing trend of drug impaired cases, we need to expand our drug casework capacity. In the third quarter, we hope to have eliminated the drug case backlog as we complete an increasing target number of drug requests, similarly to the ARCO backlog reduction schedule. However, here, we will only have 3 analysts initially, so it will take longer. And this is why it is critical for us to focus on cross-training, not just casework. In the fourth quarter, we hope to install another new technology. It's called LC/Q-TOF, which will allow us to screen for more drugs. Newer drugs, such as Kush and degenerate opioids constantly come on market, partially fueled by people trying to avoid detection. And they're being successful, as we currently cannot screen for those newer drugs. LC/Q-TOF is also needed to meet the standards set by OSEC. As they lower the detection limit of the drugs, we need a more sensitive and targeted screening instrument, which is LC/Q-TOF. So as you can see, toxicology section needs to add at least 1 instrument per year to maintain our technical competency. And unfortunately, those instruments are not cheap, so we need to plan in advance. The cost of LC/Q-TOF is about $500,000, and you saw the cost of LC triple quad. So I believe our CFO, David Leach, will include cost of those instruments under capital expense when he presents the proposed budget for the next year. So toxicology section's 3-year plan is aggressive in its timeline and ambitious in its content. It assumes that all our instruments run smoothly without problem, and we don't have any personnel changes or interruptions. And unfortunately, life is not perfect. So many factors will and can change the plan. I mean, even recently we had one of our LC system down for a couple of weeks, and it was our latest instrument. So I know there will be delays. However, I hope that this plan will allow us to think and do beyond our immediate casework, so that we become more sustainable and keep up with the advances in science and technology. So lastly, I'd like to thank the board and senior management for the support and trust you're giving to the toxicology section. Please know that my team is working diligently to provide timely and quality toxicology service to the city of Houston. This will take time, but I'm confident that it will be a worthwhile journey. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for Dr. Lee? Okay, doesn't look like there's any, so thank you, Dr. Lee, for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Okay, agenda item 12 is a report from Ms. Zemak, our quality director. She will cover quality assurance, a review of the blind quality control program, survey responses, testimony monitoring, transcript reviews, and proficiency testing. Ms. Zemak, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Good morning. So first, we have our graphical depiction of the blind quality controls that were submitted in the month of August. As you can see, a latent print blind verification was not submitted for the month of August. But as a reminder to the board, the blind verifications are not created and submitted by the quality division, but rather those are true casework samples where the conclusions of the first examiner are blinded from the verifying examiner, and those cases are selected by the latent print technical leader. And so in discussing with the latent print technical leader, she identified that she was not able to locate a good candidate case last month, but she has already submitted one for the month of September and has every intention of trying to submit two so that we are on pace with our yearly goal for our blind quality controls. And as you can see, all of the rest of our monthly goals were in fact met. I have a couple of slides on blind quality controls, so please feel free to either interrupt me or I will pause at the end to see if there are any questions. And so September 3rd, 2020 marked the 5-year anniversary for HFSC's blind program. All told, in the 5 years that the program has been in place here at HFSC, there have been 1,989 blinds submitted so far. So as you can see from the graph, the toxicology section has had the most blinds submitted. It's for a number of reasons. The first being that they were the first section to have blind quality controls submitted back in 2015. And also, as you could see from the graph that I just showed, they have the highest number of blinds submitted on a monthly basis. And so those two factors combined have them leading the pack. But as you can see, C's Drugs is close behind. But all told, this is the blind program broken down per section since its inception in 2015. And just for those who like numbers as opposed to graphs, I've provided the same data, but broken down per section. Again, it's the number of blinds submitted and then also completed. And so lastly, for blinds, I wanted the board to know that there is going to be a presentation given later this month at the Virginia Commonwealth University, or the VCU. That presentation is going to be about an hour long, and it's being given by 2 representatives from the quality division. It's being given for the Forensic Science Department's seminar series. While the class itself is geared towards graduate students from their numerous forensic science disciplines, it is also open to some undergraduates as well. And so, like I said, the subject of the presentation will be the blind program. There was a blind presentation given at a previous professional conference back in 2017, and actually that connection helped to foster this presentation from being given. Someone in the audience from that presentation reached out and asked specifically if HFSC would be able to provide a presentation about the blind program to the Forensic Science Department's seminar series. And so we're happy to be able to participate. Also, there will be another blind program presentation given in October. The Association of Forensic Quality Assurance Managers, or AFQAM, typically has an annual conference that's scheduled in October. Unfortunately, that conference was canceled this year due to COVID, but they have decided that they would like to provide online training during that time that was reserved for the conference. And so they also reached out to HFSC to see if we would be able to help provide any of that training. And so again, two representatives from the quality division will be giving that presentation. That will be about an hour. And we are very fortunate to have all of these opportunities to spread the word about the blind program. And lastly, I wanted to share with the board that a multimedia blind was discovered this past month. I'm going to read to you what the analyst responded when asked how he knew the case was a blind. I think you'll understand why I'm reading it verbatim. So he responded, "I reviewed the video multiple times, and while reviewing, I noticed that the histograms for the frames of the video containing the license plate were a bit unusual. With regards to image analysis, a histogram is the plot of the tonal values of the image. The distribution appeared normal for a nighttime image. However, there was a consistent spike in the lighter tonal values near the plot's maximum value. This spike in lighter tonal values is likely the license plate, which appears almost entirely white in the image. While it isn't unusual for a license plate to reflect light and overload a camera sensor, I would expect the tonal values to vary a bit more as the distance and angular relationship between the plate and the image sensors changes. This was the primary red flag that put me onto alert that this case might be a blind." And so I read it to you clearly because I'll be honest, I don't know how to manipulate the tonal values of a histogram in a video, and I have confirmed neither does anybody else as part of the quality division. And so while we appreciate his suggestion that we were able to do that level of manipulation, I think it is fair to say that we are not quite yet that sophisticated. In fact, I'm not sure what it would take outside of a very large budget increase to be able to achieve that level of sophistication. But yet again, this is just another example of when staff have completely wowed us with how they are able to ascertain blind quality controls. Are there any questions about the blinds that I can answer? Okay.
I was going to say congratulations that the blind quality control program continues to be, really sought after and a model for other crime labs. So congratulations to everyone on the team for the hard work on that.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to give the board an update about the Organization of Scientific Area Committees, that's OSAC. I know that Peter spoke about OSAC a little bit previously. And so what I'm hoping to achieve with this slide is to give the board an overview of where we stand. It's a snapshot in time as far as implementation of the OSAC registry standards. And so as you can see, let's focus on seized drugs. There have been 2 standards published, and Seized Drugs has documented compliance with both of those standards. Just recently, the crime scene unit has also documented compliance with a standard that was released having to do with the collection and preservation of evidence from crime scenes. In order to achieve that, I wanted to point out to the board that crime scene unit had to review not only their standard operating procedure, but also their training program in order to make sure that we had all of the necessary components to be able to declare that compliance. Also, while they were in the process of revising their training program, they also were the first section to be able to declare their compliance to that interdisciplinary standard that Peter referred to earlier. So that interdisciplinary standard speaks to not only the training programs and has some very specific points that need to be met for the training programs, but also professional development and that requirement of 16 hours of professional development a year. And so the crime scene unit was able to document their achievement of that interdisciplinary standard. And so they're the first of many. Kudos to them. The digital training program is quick behind, and also the latent print section. Both their comparison and processing training programs are right there. And all told, the quality division's goal is to achieve full company compliance with that standard by the month of October. And I will update the board, of course, with our progress to confirm that that has in fact been done. And then lastly, I wanted to point out to the board the toxicology, forensic biology, and multimedia sections. The toxicology has one standard that was recently published that they have not yet declared compliance to. We are actively working with them to see what compliance looks like for them. I know DeYoung mentioned just before about some of the limitations in some of their instrumentation and what compliance would have to, what it would entail to achieve compliance, as well as the 3 for the forensic biology section and also the multimedia section. But as a reminder to the board, from the day those standards publish on the OSAC registry, sections have a year all told in order to be able to gain and document that compliance. And so the quality division is actively working with those sections to try and make sure that we are able to achieve those deadlines. Are there any questions about OSAC that I can answer for the board? Okay, next I wanted to discuss survey responses. We had 2 additional survey responses in the month of August, and they were both very satisfied. Both surveys were pursuant to their satisfaction with CSEM's response time. And so now all told, we've had 27 responses since February 2020, when we initiated our new survey and included that link into our emails. I've also included the surveys themselves in the detailed data in case there were any board members who wanted to actually go through and read the specific feedback that we received. But one of them was from a prosecutor and another was from an investigator. So we will continue to well, hopefully we continue to receive all of this feedback from our stakeholders. Are there any questions about survey responses that I can answer? Okay.
Yes,
like
Ms. Blanchett, I think Director Blanchett has a question for you, Ms.
Sure.
Seymour.
Yes.
I see that you have 6 dissatisfied or very dissatisfied responses and 3 that were neutral. How did you respond to those? And
that's a great question. And so when we receive any of the surveys that say dissatisfied or very dissatisfied, we go ahead and craft a response and preserve that response in our documentation so that we have that available for any assessors. Meaning, as part of our accreditation requirement. I know that last month I shared, we actually took action on one of those surveys and felt as though there was an opportunity for improvement. So that was, what we did is also incorporated into that. And for the satisfied nor dissatisfied, it really depends on what that feedback is, right? If you recall that one from last month, about latent prints, the responder actually identified themselves as neither satisfied nor dissatisfied, but the feedback that they gave opened us up to realize that there was a major opportunity for improvement there. So it really depends for those 3 what exactly they are saying as far as their feedback is concerned. I mean, if they don't respond at all, then we're not really in a position to be able to take any kind of action.
so I take it there wasn't any detailed response in those cases here for this month.
No, correct. There were. I mean,
Okay.
well, they were very satisfied, and you could take a look if you would like. I have it in the detailed data. There are very short responses that spoke directly to the response time for client services and case management.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And next, I'd like to speak a little bit about the transcript review project. So in this last round of transcript reviews, there were 12 transcripts that were submitted for review. And one of those transcripts in particular, I've taken an excerpt and I wanted to share here with the board. This particular excerpt talks about the blind quality control program that we have here at HFSC. And it demonstrates how the blind program can be incorporated into testimony. And we are actively trying to encourage our staff members to incorporate the blind program into their testimonies. And so excerpts from this transcript are being provided to all staff. Not only was this a great description of the blind program, but overall there were several responses that this analyst gave. For example, what is accreditation? That the quality division as a whole thought were very strong and great examples of, testimony responses that should be shared out with all staff. And so we're going to be sharing this out and actually documenting the review from all technical staff for the excerpts from this particular transcript. And then that's really raised a broader question, which is there more that we could be doing with the transcripts that we have from the transcript review project? And so the quality division is actively working with trying to ascertain what is the best way to have these transcripts to basically get more value out of them. And we are considering providing them to the technical sections for potential incorporation into their training programs. I mean, it would be beneficial for new trainees to be able to read through what a transcript looks like, and as well as competent, authorized, current staff members, just to see, this is how I explain accreditation when I'm on the stand. Are there other ways out there? Are there better, more complete ways out there? So the hope and information sharing is just to sort of expose staff to options that are out there when they are testifying. Because, right, when you testify, I mean, obviously, you know what you're saying. And if you're serving as a monitor, you're exposed to someone else's responses, but it's pretty limited to that in that sense. So the hope would be to information share what other responses are being given, especially when we're talking about qualifying questions, these general questions. Where do you work? What is HFSC? What is accreditation? And so to be able to help staff identify stronger responses, more complete responses, like I've said. The other thing about the transcript review project that I wanted to share with the board is, if you recall, we had a recent disclosure to the Texas Forensic Science Commission where we discovered that transcript for that testimony through the transcript review project. Just as a small recap, we identified that there was a crime scene investigator who essentially testified beyond the scope of his expertise. And so when that disclosure was discussed at the last Texas Forensic Science Commission meeting in July, the commission voted no further action needed, meaning they were satisfied with the laboratory's response. But in their final documentation, which shows that no further action needed was ultimately their vote, they went on to say, and I'm quoting, "The laboratory discovered the issue as a result of a proactive and commendable transcript review program." And so I wanted to share that with the board, that the TFSC has commended us for having this project. And so I see a lot of benefits coming out of this project. In speaking to some recent staff members, I understand that reading your own transcript is much like watching back your own public speaking. It's not an enjoyable experience necessarily. And having others read your transcript, again, it's not necessarily enjoyable, right? There's a little bit of a vulnerability there. But our hope with continuing the project is to sort of just normalize that concern, right? Normalize that vulnerability and have it be just a routine quality check that HFSC engages in, and it's just, part of business and helps kind of build that quality, or that culture quality, right? That continuous improvement quality, continuous improvement culture that we are trying so hard to build. And so I think it's just another example of how this transcript review project is really beneficial to us as a company. Are there any questions for transcript review that I can answer? Okay, and then lastly, I wanted to give an update on testimony. So Harris County has officially suspended jury trials through October 1st. And so looking at the data so far for this year, all told, we've had 23 analysts testify. 3 of those testimonies were provided remotely, and 3 analysts, separate 3 analysts, have not been monitored. And so typically what we do is either have that analyst monitored at their next testimony, or we go ahead and request that transcript so that we can perform an evaluation in order to fulfill our accreditation requirement. And due to COVID-19, I think our opportunities for staff to be testifying again sometime this year are rapidly dwindling. So we are going to go ahead and execute. We're going to request those transcripts and go ahead and get them evaluated and err on the side of caution, again, to ensure that our accreditation requirement is fulfilled this year and that we don't have any issues. Are there any questions on testimony that I can answer? Okay, and then lastly, we have the detailed data. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great report. Okay, are there any other questions for Ms. Zemek? All right, we are at agenda item 13, which is adjournment. Great meeting today. I would like to have a motion to adjourn. Okay, Director Moore made the motion. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Director Medina. He seconded the motion to adjourn. Is there anything else that, let's see, hang on. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, the meeting is adjourned. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing everyone next month in October.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Take care.